As a professional nerd, I have many computers in my life, and they all kind of serve different purposes. The iPhone is my personal computer, the Mac is my work computer, the Apple Watch is my health computer, and the Apple TV is my entertainment computer. Until recently, I didn't really have a clear place or definition for the iPad. I used it a lot, but I can never really explain why I would choose it over something else. Like, why would I choose the iPad over the iPhone or over the Mac? And even though I used it, it was a little bit fuzzy. I've landed at a place where I do think I have a better idea of where the iPad fits for me within all the other computers I have and the ways I use it. And really it boils down to the iPad is my hobby computer. So in the rest of this video, I'm just going to talk about my experience with the iPad and how it's ended up as my hobby computer. So a little context before I jump in. Everything I'm sharing here is my opinion and just about me. I know that there are plenty of other people who use the iPad as their primary computer or maybe only computer, and they do a ton of work on it. That is not my experience. I'm just talking about, how I've used the iPad and where I think it fits for me. So if you're someone who uses the iPad in a different way than me, that's totally fine. Like many people, there was this period where I thought the iPad could fill this kind of everything computer role for me, and actually saw it as a very viable replacement for the Mac, and actually did a bunch of things to say, okay, you know what? I'm going to really treat this thing as like a traditional computer and try not to use my Mac for a lot of this stuff. This was especially true even when Apple released the Magic Keyboard with the iPad Pros. You have a full keyboard, and doing more like productivity tasks was easier with the keyboard for sure. There was also this stretch of time where Apple was seriously pushing the iPad as like a Mac replacement, right? Or a laptop replacement, at least. I remember buying into that pretty heavily and getting pretty excited about it. This was before the new Apple Silicon Macs. And at that time, using Intel machines, they were heavy, slow, they were loud. The fans would just kick on for basically anything that would run very hot. So the idea of this very thin sheet of glass that could be a tablet at any point, or if I dock it in a keyboard, it's like a Mac, right? It's like a computer. That was so enticing. And you have crazy battery life too, which was just amazing. Unfortunately, I kind of came to the conclusion that I couldn't replace my Mac with an iPad for the types of things that I do. The main reason I couldn't do it is because I build software for a living. So my primary job and income is I work on an iOS app called Sofa, and you literally cannot use an iPad to build apps, right? I know you can do some stuff with, was it Swift Playgrounds, I think? You really can't work on an app in that way. And it's possible at some point that, I kind of thought that Apple at some point will release Xcode for the iPad in the same way they've done Final Cut Pro and Logic Pro. Maybe they still will. I kind of feel like if they do, it'll be kind of like a baby version of it, and it'll come with a lot of caveats and restrictions. That's even true with Final Cut Pro and with Logic Pro. Like, you can't just pass them back and forth between the Mac. There are, significant differences there. But I feel like there's going to be enough restrictions that it's going to make it kind of impossible to use for like a full app. Now, personally, when I use the iPad, I prefer to use apps in just a single app mode, right? Like one app at a time, full screen. And I know that iOS or iPadOS has, you can do split view, you can do slide over, there's, what's the other one called? Stage Manager. All of those are interesting and cool in some ways, but none of them have really clicked for me. Honestly, I just like picking up the iPad and seeing apps in full screen, just like my phone. It just feels like that makes a lot more sense for this thing. This thing's connected to a keyboard and I'm kind of in work mode, kind of jumping between apps. Like anytime I need to do something that is even a little bit more complicated, it could be as simple as like, oh, I need to grab information from one app and bring it to another. Everything just feels harder to do on the iPad for me. And I'm very comfortable on the Mac, and doing that kind of stuff and having multiple apps and windows and all that kind of stuff on the Mac is just piece of cake. And on the iPad, it has never felt natural to me to use it that way. I feel like it starts to fall apart for me, and it does not become very pleasant to use at all. And after all this experimentation, honestly, I came to the realization that I just love the Mac, and Mac OS. And I've been using it for close to 20 years at this point, so I am very comfortable with it. I understand it very well. Managing files is so easy, and like I mentioned before, like multiple windows, multiple apps. And when I'm in work mode, it just makes sense, right? I always have a keyboard with me. I'm either using a trackpad or a mouse. I can connect it to a big display, and I can use all the specific apps that I want, and copying and pasting between stuff is very simple. Like the computery stuff is excellent on the Mac because that's really what it was designed for and, you know, kind of built for over the decades. I've kind of just accepted that I just love the Mac. And if I was forced for some reason to, okay, I can literally only have one computer, like choosing between iPhone, iPad, Mac, all that kind of stuff, I would have to pick the Mac because it's, I mean, it's literally, it's the tool I use the most to make a living, but I just love the Mac. So now that I have this clear idea of where the iPad fits for me, I want to kind of go over some of the good areas and really the areas and workflows that I use it the most with a lot of enjoyment. So first thing is just casual computing, right? So this is basically anything that isn't work related. So if I'm just browsing the web, if I'm maybe triaging some emails or kind of reviewing some notes or whatever that may be, maybe like shopping online or something, that's the best. So like when I'm done work and I go sit on the couch, like that's really when the iPad comes out. And you know, it's like, I think people give it crap for not being the Mac. And it's like, oh, well, you can't produce stuff on it. And it's like, I mean, who cares? Like for just relaxing and having a nice casual computer, it's awesome. And I have accepted that instead of trying to force it into something it isn't. I've just kind of accepted that, and I enjoy it much more. Next one's entertainment. Like this is everyone's thing with the iPad. Watching videos, watching movies, TV shows, reading books, playing games, all those things. Like the iPad is killer for that stuff. And honestly, the iPad is probably the greatest and best TV I've ever owned, right? Like we have a big TV in the living room and we use it a lot, but if you think like the iPad is this TV I can literally take anywhere, right? I can bring it to bed, I can bring it on vacation, I can bring it in the bathroom, right? Like anywhere I'm at. When you're using all those other video apps, you can save stuff to be viewed offline, which you can do on the Mac, but it's like, you know, you have to do some weird stuff to get there. So as like a TV, it's like the best TV I've ever had. The last thing is photo editing. And outside of work, photography is probably my biggest hobby and the thing I'm most serious about hobby-wise. But editing photos on an iPad I love it. There's something about like, you have this big screen that you're holding so you can get very close to stuff and you can manipulate stuff with your fingers, and just seeing it all live there. And honestly, the iPad screen is, I mean, now with like the OLED, it's probably the best screen I have. So in terms of like color reproduction and seeing like accurate stuff, it's super nice. And yeah, I think like if I had to pick one device to edit photos with, it would be the iPad. So all that being said, like it took me a couple years to get here and to digest all of my use of these different computers that I have and where they fit into my life. And I definitely have a much clearer idea of where the iPad fits, right? It's my hobby computer. When I'm just kind of hanging out or doing computing type stuff that is for my hobbies, the iPad is a great tool for that because it definitely puts me in a different state of mind, right? Like when I'm at the Mac, like I can do all those things on the Mac and I have done those things, but the Mac to me is work, right? So when I have the laptop out, like I'm in work mode, and the change of perspective and state of mind with the iPad is really nice because it just puts me in a more relaxed state where, you know, I'm not working, right? I don't have to go check email. I don't have to answer any messages. If I want to start editing some photos, I can do that. Or if I want to just randomly, you know, browse the internet, like I can do that, or watch YouTube and stuff. So I feel a lot of clarity and a lot better about the iPad, where I don't feel like I'm forcing it into something it's not. Like I said earlier, like there's going to be people who, for their work, like if I didn't build software for a living, I could probably use the iPad for a lot of work stuff, right? I may not enjoy it as much as the Mac because again, like I said, I'm very comfortable with it. I think for my specific uses, like the Mac is so key and that's fine. And trying to force the iPad to pick up that slack, it's just not the right tool, and that's fine. So that's it. Be curious to hear your thoughts about the iPad. I know there's a lot of wild ones out there, but be curious to see if, if your opinions on the iPad has changed, or if you're having more clarity as time moves on about how the iPad fits into your life. But yeah, anyway, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.